You're not going to believe this. Joy Behar and The View apparently think too highly of themselves to think straight, and that's what led to an embarrassing display of narcissism when, in a conversation with Rachel Maddow, said Donald Trump would shut down their TV show if elected president. But like most of us, even Tim Pool couldn't resist bursting the bubble of the hubris from The View. But before I show you that, you need to see what Joy Behar and Rachel Maddow said that started it all.
Let me ask you this, because there's been a lot of talk about Trump seeking retribution if he gets into office, for his legal troubles, for his personal troubles, for his hair, whatever. He always has somebody to blame, you know? So you said recently that you thought that you, as an outspoken critic, could be a target yourself. Some people think that sounds overdramatic, but I'm right there with you. I think that he is so vindictive that he will go after, however he has to, through the IRS maybe, or even through sponsors to get us off the air maybe, or you.
By the way, subscribe for more discussions like this. I think that an inflated sense of self-importance just jumps at you from the screen, but it's interesting that people like Joy or Rachel seem to forget that despite the friction that existed between Trump and the media, we've got 4 full years of a president to see how that squares against reality. I think Joy Behar just displayed almost the same level of political ignorance here that Whoopi Goldberg did on the issue of presidential immunity. Both seem to think that a president even has the power or leverage to just take a show off the air if he doesn't like it, which obviously isn't true, but Tim Pool had a much less polite way of saying that, so take a look at this.
Joy Behar is worried Trump will pull Maddow off and The View off the air. You know, I saw that meme. I can't remember who said it. They said, Lord, or was it Aaron McIntyre? He said, Lord, give me the Trump the left has created in their delusional minds. But I just want to point out how they're telling on themselves.
Yeah.
The things they are doing, they're like, oh, Trump might do what we do.
Yeah, Trump might do the exact things that we have done. I don't know, let's say to Mike Lindell, who had all of his products pulled out of stores. Or, I don't know, Donald Trump, who's been the target of specific persecution. Like,
or when she mentions the little guy, like, we have resources, we'll be fine. Yeah, when the big tech companies, for leftist reasons, went after all of these smaller Trump-supporting accounts.
Tim Pool just underestimated that because talking of political censorship on corporate and social media, it wasn't just the smaller accounts. It was literally Donald Trump himself that was first banned on Twitter in 2021, and then Facebook and YouTube that did the same, supposedly suspending the former president for a minimum of 7 days. Those 7 days turned out to be over 2 years, since it was only last year that the ban was lifted, and then you've got the likes of Joy Behar and The View, with a classic case of projection and a complete blindness to the historical precedents, making an absurdly dramatic claim like that. The ideological bent across Silicon Valley and social media companies, as well as much of the modern mainstream media, is a secret from no one. Rachel Maddow echoed that doomsday from the panel, but it didn't make it sound any smarter.
So I was asked, am I worried about me? And my answer was, I'm worried about all of us. I'm no more worried about me than I am worried about everybody in the country. I think it's bad to have somebody saying, give me as much power as you can in this country so I can use it to go after other Americans. So I can use it to go after these subhuman internal enemies, and I'll destroy them. Like, that's just not a good system for anybody. I mean, I think that if he decides that he's going to go after you or me or anybody who's well known, you know, we have resources, we'll likely be fine. But I think there's a pattern where he picks out individual people and effectively terrorizes them. I mean, there's Stormy Daniels wearing a bulletproof vest to get into the courthouse, right?
Once you have political violence, you have fascism following that.
Wait, wasn't it Rachel Maddow herself that made airwaves just a few years ago when she publicly called on news channels in the country to stop airing then-President Donald Trump's press briefings during the pandemic for their misinformation? How do you go from that to then projecting the same happening to you in the future with no recognition of how absurd and contradictory that sounds? She's quoted to have remarked back in 2021 that, and I quote, I feel like we should inoculate ourselves against the harmful impact of those ongoing false promises and false statements by the president by recognizing that when he is talking about the epidemic more often than not, he's lying. So the sooner we come to terms with that, I think the better for all of us. If it were up to me, and it was not, I would stop putting those briefings on live TV, not out of spite, but because it's misinformation. Well, that's exactly what everyone says when they need to mask their desire for censoring someone in their version of what they think is good and virtuous. And to be honest, the greater threat to The View or Rachel Maddow's show isn't an overbearing president, but their dwindling ratings and reviews across the audience. Rachel Maddow understands that as well, especially during 2019, where her show faced a massive average drop of 19% over her constant peddling the Russia collusion narrative, and all that happening in conjunction to The View as well, receiving terrible reviews for its naive political partisanship. that has just become boring recently for much of the audience. And honestly, anyone who's an increasingly small segment of people that still completely rely on mainstream television for their news probably knows that there's a stark discrepancy in how guests and hosts are treated depending on their political leanings. We saw an example of that just this week, in fact, when CNN's Casey Hunt shut down Donald Trump's campaign spokesperson Caroline Leavitt for supposedly attacking her colleagues when she was actually making a point about whether CNN's hosts are fit for moderating the upcoming debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Take a look at that incredible moment that gives you a window into what the mainstream media has become as of late.
If you talk to analysts of debates previous, that if you're attacking the moderators, you're usually losing. So I really want to focus in on what these two men are going to do and say when they stand on the stage.
Well, first of all, it takes someone 5 minutes to Google Jake Tapper, Donald Trump, to see that Jake Tapper has consistently, frequently liked President Trump to Adolf Hitler.
Ma'am, I'm going to stop this interview if you continue to attack my colleagues. I would like to talk about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who you work for.
Yes.
If you are here to speak on his behalf, I am willing to have this conversation.
I am stating facts that your colleagues have stated in the past.
Okay,
now,
I'm sorry, guys. We're going to come back out to the panel. Caroline, thank you very much for your time. You are welcome to come back at any point. She is welcome.
This kind of political shadow banning isn't limited to one end of the political spectrum, but the fact is that while their nature may not be different, their scale certainly is, and when someone like Joy Behar and Rachel Maddow project something like that onto the presidency, it only ends up making themselves look naive and ignorant. Mainstream media like MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News are very well funded and have more than enough lawyers and political connections to be able to fight a legal battle with the administration if need be. That's exactly what CNN did when they filed a lawsuit against then-President Donald Trump, claiming their reporters were being mistreated by Trump and White House staff. But even if you put that aside, it's interesting that a show like The View would be so subsumed by their sense of self-importance to not even recognize how irrelevant they are in the grand political scheme of things. And as for Rachel Maddow, that's literally no reason for her to make that absurd claim, because we saw her show still on air while she was peddling the Russia collusion narrative, while it was the same Donald Trump that was president at the time. Tell me in the comments why you believe there's such a scary front being created about a potential Trump second term in the media, but in the few months before we find out in the election, it's shows and segments like this that tell you exactly where much of the mainstream media stands today.